You're not late. You're never late. In fact, you're already there parked outside, sitting in your car, watching the clock tick toward the actual arrival time you told yourself you'd respect. Or you're standing near the entrance. Or you've already done a quiet lap of the room. Noted the exits, found where you'll sit, run a quick mental simulation of how the next hour is probably going to go. And from the outside, this looks like punctuality, like consideration, like a simple personality trait. But what's actually happening inside is considerably more interesting than that. The 10 minutes that aren't really about time. People who arrive early aren't just being polite, they're running a specific internal process, one that has almost nothing to do with the clock and everything to do with the nervous system. The buffer, those 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes of early arrival, functions as a physiological shock absorber. A window of time where the person can process the environment before the environment starts making demands of them. They survey the room, they locate the relevant people, they calibrate the energy, they run through possible scenarios and prepare responses. By the time the meeting or the event or the appointment actually begins, they're not just present, they're oriented, they know the terrain. For someone whose brain operates at high sensitivity to environmental unpredictability, this pre-arrival window isn't a preference, it's a functional necessity. The alternative, arriving exactly on time, or worse, slightly late, dropped into a situation without that orientation period, produces a level of internal disruption that the external situation rarely warrants. What conscientiousness actually costs? Psychology consistently identifies early arrival as a behavioral signature of high conscientiousness, one of the most robust personality traits in the research literature, associated with reliability, planning, and a strong internal standard for performance. But what the standard descriptions don't fully capture is the load that conscientiousness carries. A highly conscientious brain doesn't experience a preventable risk that was not adequately prevented. The mental simulation of what could go wrong, traffic, parking, a slow elevator, an unexpected delay, runs automatically and thoroughly, and the only thing that quiets it is arriving early enough that none of those variables can produce a bad outcome. This is why people who are chronically early often describe a very specific emotional shift the moment they arrive. Not excitement, not relief exactly, something quieter and internal settling. The clock stops being an adversary, the simulation stops running. The body can finally stop preparing and start actually being there. Neuroscientists would describe this as a cortisol drop, the measurable decrease in stress hormones that occurs when a perceived threat is resolved. For the early arriver, the threat was the possibility of being late, and it was resolved before it could materialize. Where this gets complicated. There's a version of early arrival that is genuinely adaptive, a tool for managing a sensitive nervous system in a world that is objectively unpredictable. Transit fails, technology glitches, schedules shift without warning. Arriving with margin is, by any reasonable measure, a functional strategy. But there's another version worth examining honestly. When the need to arrive early becomes non-negotiable, when the absence of a buffer produces genuine anxiety rather than mild discomfort, when it creates friction in relationships with people who operate on looser timing, when the sense of control that early arrival provides becomes something you can't function without, it's worth asking what exactly is being protected. For some people, the fear of being late isn't really about inconvenience, it's about exposure, about being seen as someone who didn't prepare, didn't manage, didn't have it together. The 10-minute buffer isn't just practical, it's a shield against a very specific kind of shame. And like all shields, it's worth knowing when you're carrying it because it's useful, and when you're carrying it because you've forgotten you can put it down. The quiet advantage. Here's what's genuinely true about people who operate this way. In a world that increasingly treats time as fluid, where I'm 5 minutes away means 15, where schedules are suggestions, where the default is reactive rather than prepared, the person who arrives early and oriented carries a real advantage. They're present before most people have finished arriving. They've already done the cognitive work of acclimation. When things start, they're not catching up, they're already there. That's not a small thing. The 10-minute buffer at its best isn't anxiety, it's clarity. It's the quiet before engagement, and for a mind that thinks this way, it might be the most productive 10 minutes of the day.